The Galactic Concord's grand arena pulsed with a low thrum of alien biology and high-energy tech, a living cathedral of muscle, ego, and interspecies politics carved into the heart of Xylos Prime. 10,000 spectators from 53 star systems filled the tiered amphitheater, their forms ranging from methane-breathing insectoids wrapped in pressurized chitin to gelatinous blobs suspended in anti-grav pods. At the center of it all, bathed in harsh white spotlights that cut through the violet haze of the planet's upper atmosphere, stood the ring, a circular combat platform forged from neutron star alloy, smooth as glass and cold as betrayal. Laughter echoed through the stands, not polite chuckles, but deep, guttural roars of derision that vibrated the very air. It came mostly from the Cthar delegation, hulking brutes with obsidian skin for arms and tusks longer than human femurs. Their champion, Grak the Unbroken, had just finished dismantling a cybernetically enhanced Veln warrior in under 90 seconds. Now he stood in the ring, flexing claws that could shear Durasteel, roaring his challenge to the galaxy. "Send me another snack," Grak bellowed in trade standard, his voice modulator crackling with distortion. "Or are all your species soft like overripe fruit?" The Concord Overseer, a slender avian diplomat named Zilra of the Quill Collective, fluttered her iridescent wings nervously. The annual Interstellar Martial Exhibition was meant to foster unity, not humiliation. But ever since humanity had been granted provisional membership 3 cycles ago, thanks only to their uncanny knack for surviving impossible odds, the other species had treated them as cosmic afterthoughts. Goo, curious, harmless. And now they'd made the mistake of volunteering a representative. From the human delegation's modest seating block near the back, a figure rose. Not in armor, not in powered exosuit, not even in military fatigues. Just simple saffron robes, bare feet, and a shaved head that gleamed under the arena lights. He moved with a calm, so absolute it seemed to bend the chaos around him into stillness. The laughter redoubled. "Is that a monk?" squawked a reptilian merchant from the Drax's Combine, nearly choking on his nutrient slurry. "Humans sent a priest to fight Grak. Look at his arms. They're thinner than my daughter's antennae. He'll be paced before he takes 3 steps." Even among the humans, there was tension. Captain Elias Vance of the Terran Defense Corps clenched his jaw, fingers digging into the armrests of his seat. He hadn't wanted this. He'd argued until his throat was raw. But Elder Master Liang had insisted. "This is not about victory," the old man had said, eyes closed, hands folded in his lap as if meditating on the edge of a supernova. "It is about showing them what we are." And so here he was, walking alone down the ramp toward the ring, past security drones that whirred in confusion, past armed guards who hesitated because protocol didn't cover unarmed spiritual leaders entering death matches. Grak spotted him immediately. His 4 eyes narrowed. Then he threw back his head and laughed, a sound like boulders grinding in a volcano. "A bald monkey in pajamas," he roared. "Do you come to pray for your bones before I crush them? Or do you think your little chance will stop my fist?" Master Liang didn't answer. He stepped onto the ring. The alloy surface calibrated to absorb kinetic energy and reflect biosignatures flickered beneath his feet, but registered nothing. No muscle mass worth noting. No cybernetics. No weapon signatures. Just a human. Average height, 62 years old. Heart rate, 58 BPM. The crowd leaned forward, expecting a swift, brutal end. A cautionary tale about hubris. What they got was silence. Master Liang bowed, not to Grak, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, as one warrior might greet another, regardless of size, species, or reputation. It was a gesture lost on most aliens, but not on every human in the stands. Some began to sit up straighter. Others whispered prayers. Grak snorted. "Enough ceremony. D." He charged. Forearms became blurs. Each strike carried enough force to shatter granite. He didn't aim to kill immediately. He wanted to break limbs first, make an example. His first blow, a downward hammer fist from his upper right arm, should have caved in Liang's skull. But Liang wasn't there. He'd shifted half a step left, turning his body like water parting around a stone. The fist slammed into the ring with a thunderclap that sent shockwaves rippling outward. Before Grak could recover, Liang's palm struck the Kthares' inner elbow, just below the joint. Not hard, precise. Grak grunted. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. That spot tingled, like static shock but deeper. His arm went momentarily numb. What? Liang flowed into the opening. He didn't punch, didn't kick. He redirected. As Grak swung his lower left arm in a wild haymaker, Liang stepped inside the arc, caught the wrist, and used the Kthares' own momentum to spin him slightly off balance. Then, with the lightest touch like brushing dust from a scroll, he tapped a point just above Grak's collarbone. The effect was instantaneous. Grak staggered. His breathing hitched. His four eyes widened in disbelief. My chest, the crowd fell silent. Even the ambient hum of the arena seemed to pause. Because Grak the Unbroken, champion of 7 systems, undefeated in 63 sanctioned bouts, was wheezing. Liang didn't press the advantage. He stepped back, hands returning to his sides, posture relaxed. Breathe, he said softly, though the microphones picked it up and broadcast it across the arena. Your lungs are tight. Fear lives in the diaphragm. Grak growled, shaking off the sensation. Tricks. Illusions. You use human witchcraft. Nobitichkraft liangri plaiv. Only understanding. He raised his right hand, palm open. An invitation. Adare. Grak roared again, this time with fury. He lunged, all 4 arms flailing in a storm of violence designed to overwhelm any defense. Claws raked the air. Fists pounded the platform. The ring's sensors flashed red warnings, impact levels exceeding safety thresholds. But Liang was never where the blows landed. He moved like smoke, like shadow given form. Every dodge was economical, every evasion a lesson in physics and timing. He didn't evade out of fear, he evaded to teach, to show that speed wasn't just about reflexes, but perception, that strength wasn't just mass, but alignment. Then, in the middle of Grak's third furious barrage, Liang did something unexpected. He stopped moving. Grak's upper right fist shot toward Liang's face, certain to connect. At the last possible millisecond, Liang tilted his head into the punch. Not away, into it. The crowd gasped, but the blow never landed. Because as Liang tilted, he also shifted his weight forward, stepping inside Grak's guard, and placed his open palm flat against the Kthares' sternum, and pushed. Not hard, just pushed. Grak flew backward as if struck by a freighter. He crashed into the far edge of the ring, skidding 10 meters before coming to a stop, dazed, his massive chest heaving. Murmurs erupted in the stands. How? A human, no, a monk, had thrown a Kthar warlord like a sack of grain? Zilra, the overseer, leaned forward, her avian eyes wide. She'd studied human history. She knew of their wars, their art, their strange obsession with balance. But this was something else. On the ring, Grak rose slowly, blood trickling from split lip. His arrogance was cracking, replaced by something colder, respect edged with fear. You are not what you seem, he rumbled. I'm exactly what I seem, Liang said. A student of movement, a listener of breath, a servant of stillness. Grak charged again, but this time there was hesitation in his strikes. He was watching, learning, trying to predict, and that was his undoing. Liang waited until Grak committed to a double-fisted overhead smash. Then, instead of dodging, he dropped low, swept one leg behind Grak's ankle, and simultaneously struck 2 points along the Kthares' spine, between the 3rd and 4th vertebrae, and just below the base of the skull. Grak froze. His arms locked mid-swing. His legs trembled. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. What did you do? He choked out. I reminded your nervous system who is in charge, Liang said gently. Rest now. Grak collapsed like a felled tree, unconscious before he hit the ground. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Then, slowly, a single pair of hands began to clap. It was Captain Vance, standing, clapping with tears in his eyes. One by one, other humans joined, then a few curious aliens, then more, until the entire arena was filled not with laughter, but with thunderous, disbelieving applause. Zilra activated the central comm by the rules of the exhibition, she announced, her voice trembling slightly. The victor is Master Liang of Earth. As medics rushed to attend to Grak, Liang walked to the edge of the ring and bowed once more to the crowd, to the stars, to the unseen forces that guided all things. He didn't speak of glory, didn't demand recognition. He simply returned to his seat, poured himself a cup of green tea from a thermos, and sipped it as if he'd just finished sweeping the temple courtyard. But across the galaxy, something had shifted. The humans were no longer soft, no longer curious pets. They were something else, something ancient, something quiet, something that moved like wind and struck like lightning. And the Galactic Concord would never underestimate them again. But the real test was yet to come, because word travels fast in the void, and not all who heard of the monk's victory were impressed. Some were threatened. Deep in the obsidian spires of the Vorth hegemony, a militaristic empire that viewed the Concord as weak and decadent, a high marshal named Kale Vorth watched the arena footage for the 7th time. His crimson eyes narrowed as Liang deflected Grak's final blow. Humans, he muttered, claws tapping against his command throne. They hide wolves in sheep's robes. He turned to his adjutant. Prepare the obsidian fleet. We will visit this Earth, and we will see if their monks can stop plasma cannons as easily as fists. Meanwhile, aboard the human diplomatic vessel Horizon's Edge, Captain Vance approached Master Liang in the meditation chamber. Sir, Vance said, voice low, we just received intel. The Vorth are mobilizing. They're coming for us. Liang didn't open his eyes. All storms pass, Captain, even those forged in hatred. But they have dreadnoughts, planet killers. We barely have a unified fleet. Finally, Liang opened his eyes. They were calm, deep, full of stars. Then, we will not meet them with ships, he said. We will meet them with truth. Vance frowned. Truth? Against warships? Liang smiled faintly. You think strength is only in weapons, Captain? The greatest weapon is understanding. And the Vorth understand nothing of peace. He rose, walking to the viewport. Beyond the ship's hull, the stars burned cold and distant. They believe violence is the only language the universe speaks, Liang said. So we will teach them a new dialect. Back on Xylos Prime, the news of Liang's victory spread like wildfire through the datanets. Species that had dismissed humanity began requesting cultural exchanges. Military academies asked for training manuals. Philosophers demanded translations of human texts on martial ethics. But not everyone celebrated. In the underbelly of the Concord capital, in a dimly lit den frequented by mercenaries and information brokers, a cloaked figure watched the same footage, over and over. This figure was neither Cthar nor Vorth. It was something older, something that had watched civilizations rise and fall like tides. It spoke into a private calm, its voice a whisper of rustling leaves and distant thunder. The sleeper stirs, it said. The humans have awakened the pattern. Far away, on a forgotten moon orbiting a dead star, ancient machinery, dormant for 10 million years, began to hum. And deep within Earth's Shaolin temples, hidden beneath layers of stone and secrecy, scrolls long sealed were quietly unrolled. For the first time in centuries, the Order of the Silent Fist prepared for war. Not with guns, not with ships, but with the oldest weapon of all, the human spirit. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, the Vorth Armada accelerated towards Sol System, unaware that they weren't sailing toward a primitive world. They were sailing toward a lesson, one written in patience, precision, and the unbreakable calm of a monk who knew that sometimes the loudest statement is made in silence. The galaxy had laughed at humans. Now it would learn to listen, The horizon's edge cut through the interstellar dark like a needle threading silence. Inside its pressurized corridors, tension coiled tighter than spring steel. Captain Elias Vance hadn't slept in 36 hours. Reports flooded his console. Vorth fleet movements confirmed. Jump signatures detected near Proxima Centauri. Encrypted communiques intercepted from hegemony command hubs. The numbers didn't lie. 50 warships. 7 dreadnoughts. Enough firepower to glass Earth's surface 3 times over. And Earth had nothing to stop them. Not really. The Terran Defense Corps' entire fleet consisted of 12 aging cruisers, 30 corvettes cobbled together from salvage, and a handful of experimental stealth frigates that barely passed flight trials. Humanity's provisional Concord membership came with trade rights and cultural access, but no military backing. The other species admired Liang's victory, yes, but none would risk war with the Vorth over a newcomer. "We're on our own," Vance muttered, rubbing his temples as he stared at the star map glowing above his desk. A red cluster pulsed steadily closer to Sol. Estimated arrival, 17 days. A soft knock sounded at his door. "Enter," he said, not looking up. Master Liang stepped inside, still in his saffron robes, bare feet silent on the metal floor. He carried a simple wooden box. No tech, no power source, just smooth lacquered wood bound with silk cords. "You summoned me, Captain?" Liang asked, voice calm as morning mist. Vance finally looked up. "I did. We need a plan. Not philosophy. Not meditation. A plan. The Vorth aren't coming to spar in an arena. They're coming to erase us." Liang set the box on the desk. "And you believe violence is the only answer?" "I believe survival is the only answer," Vance shot back. "They'll burn our cities, kill billions, enslave the rest. What good is stillness when your children are ash?" For the first time since Vance had known him, Liang's expression shifted. Not anger, but sorrow. Deep, ancient sorrow. "You mistake stillness for passivity," he said gently. "Stillness is clarity. It is the eye of the storm. From it, action arises, not reaction." He opened the box. Inside lay a single scroll, yellowed with age, sealed with red wax, stamped with a lotus symbol. "This," Liang said, "is why we will not fall." Vance frowned. "A piece of paper?" "It is the Jingwei Manual," Liang replied. "Written by the first patriarch of Shaolin after he walked 10,000 miles to understand war. Not to wage it, but to end it." He unrolled the scroll carefully. The characters were inked in iron gall, precise and flowing. Diagrams showed pressure points, breathing techniques, stances, but also star charts, resonance frequencies, even rudimentary schematics of energy fields. "This isn't just martial art," Vance realized slowly. "No," Liang said. "It is applied harmony. The manual teaches that all conflict stems from imbalance between body and mind, between species, between civilizations. To restore balance, one must first understand the nature of the imbalance." He pointed to a passage. "Here, the patriarch writes, when the enemy comes with fire, do not meet fire with fire. Meet it with water. When they come with steel, do not meet steel with steel. Meet it with air." Vance leaned closer. "You're saying we should what?" "Negotiate. If they were capable of negotiation, they would not be coming," Liang said. "But they are not mindless. They are proud, arrogant, and pride can be unraveled if you know where to pull the thread." He tapped another diagram, a series of intersecting circles labeled with terms like resonance, harmonic disruption, and neural echo. "The Vorth rely on synchronized neural command networks," Liang explained. "Their ships, their soldiers, even their weapons, all linked through bioresonant implants. One mind leads, and the rest follow without question." Vance's eyes widened. "You're talking about hacking their nervous system across light years?" "Not hacking," Liang corrected. "Harmonizing. If we can broadcast a specific frequency, one that mimics the natural rhythm of deep meditation, we can induce cognitive dissonance in their command structure. Not enough to shut them down, but enough to make them question." "Question what?" "Their certainty," Liang said. "The Vorth believe they are superior. That conquest is their destiny. But doubt, once planted, spreads like root rot. A single officer hesitating for half a second during a fleet maneuver could cause catastrophic chain reactions. Vance sat back, stunned. This is insane. But it's the only thing we've got. He stood abruptly. I'll get engineering on it. But we'll need a transmitter powerful enough to reach their fleet before they enter Earth's orbit. Liang nodded. There's one place. Where? The Silent Spire. Vance went pale. That's a myth. The spire is real, Liang said. Built by early human colonists on Luna before the Great Silence. A gravity wave antenna disguised as a monastery. Abandoned after the Solar Wars. But functional. And you know how to activate it? Liang's eyes held a flicker of something old. Memory, perhaps, or duty. My order has guarded its location for 300 years. 3 days later, the horizon's edge entered lunar orbit. Below them, the moon's surface stretched gray and desolate, except for one anomaly, a slender obsidian tower rising from the sea of tranquility, half buried in regolith, humming with latent energy. No records mentioned it. No satellites had ever imaged it clearly. It bent light around itself, cloaked by ancient stealth fields. This is it, Liang said, standing beside Vance on the bridge. Looks like a tomb, Vance muttered. Is both tomb and cradle, Liang replied. They descended in a shuttle, landing softly on a platform that materialized from the dust as they approached. Inside the spire, the air was cool, scented with sandalwood and ozone. Walls pulsed with faint blue glyphs, human, but archaic, predating even old Earth scripts. At the center of the main chamber stood a dais shaped like a lotus blossom. In its heart rested a crystalline node, dormant. The harmonic core, Liang whispered. It amplifies intention into waveform. He stepped onto the dais, closed his eyes, and began to breathe, slow, deep, rhythmic. The core flickered, then glowed brighter. But something was wrong. Alarms blared on the shuttle's comms. Captain, came the voice of Lieutenant Shun from orbit. We've got company. 3 Vorth scouts just dropped out of warp at the edge of the system. They're early, Vance hissed. Ow! Liang's eyes snapped open. They tracked us. Or someone told them. Before Vance could respond, the spire's walls shimmered. Holographic projections flared to life, dozens of them, showing scenes from Earth's past. Monks training in courtyards, scholars debating under cherry blossoms, farmers tending rice paddies, children laughing in rain. And then, war. Cities burning, bombs falling, people running, screaming. The projections weren't random. They were memories, stored here, preserved. The spire doesn't just transmit, Liang realized aloud. It remembers. It holds the collective trauma and triumph of humanity. He turned to Vance. To activate the core fully, I must channel not just my will, but the will of all who came before us. Outside, the Vorth scouts began scanning the surface. They'll detect the energy spike, Vance said grimly. We have minutes. Liang knelt before the core. Then I begin now. He placed his palms on the crystal. Instantly, light erupted, not blinding, but warm, golden, like sunrise over mountains. The glyphs on the walls blazed to life. The projections shifted, now showing acts of courage, compassion, creation. A doctor saving a child in a bombed-out hospital. A poet writing verses in a prison camp. A scientist sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it. The spire was broadcasting more than a frequency. It was broadcasting humanity. On the Vorth scouts, confusion rippled through the crews. Sensors overloaded. Neural implants buzzed with static. One pilot clutched his head, crying out in pain. Not physical, but existential. Why do they sing while dying? He whispered, staring at the data stream flooding his HUD. Back on the spire, Liang trembled. The weight of centuries pressed down on him. Every joy, every sorrow, every quiet act of defiance against despair. He felt them all. Vance watched, helpless, as the monk's face grew pale, sweat beading on his brow. Master Liang, do not interrupt, Liang gasped. The signal must reach Earth. Must be ready when the fleet arrives. Above them, the Vorth scouts broke formation. One veered off course, colliding with a crater rim in a silent explosion. Another powered down its weapons, drifting aimlessly. But the third fired. A plasma bolt streaked toward the spire. Vance tackled Liang off the dais just as the blast hit. The chamber shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The core flickered dangerously. They're targeting the source. Vance yelled, dragging Liang toward the exit. We have to go. Liang resisted. The transmission isn't complete. It's enough. Vance roared. Or we die here, and Earth dies with us. Reluctantly, Liang allowed himself to be pulled away. As they sprinted for the shuttle, the spire began to collapse behind them, its ancient systems overloading from the strain. They barely made it off the surface before the entire structure imploded, vanishing into a vortex of distorted space-time. In orbit, the horizon's edge jumped to emergency warp, fleeing toward Earth. Behind them, the last Vorth scout ship hovered over the ruins of the spire. Its captain, a grizzled veteran named Torvak, stared at the sensor logs, still filled with human voices, laughter, lullabies. He deleted the attack order. Instead, he sent a single message back to High Marshal Cale Vorth. The humans are not weak. They're dangerous in ways we do not understand. Proceed with caution. On Earth, the signal arrived. It poured into global networks, not as data, but as feeling. Citizens woke from dreams of peace. Soldiers lowered their rifles, haunted by sudden empathy. Children drew pictures of strange monks with kind eyes. In Geneva, the United Earth Council convened an emergency session. What was that? Demanded General Rostova, head of planetary defense. Dr. Amara Patel, chief xenopsychologist, played a recording, a fragment of the Spire's broadcast. A woman singing a lullaby in Mandarin, layered over the sound of wind through bamboo. It's not a weapon, she said. It's an invitation to remember who we are. Across the planet, people began gathering, not in panic but in unity. Temples, churches, mosques, community centers filled with those seeking connection. Artists painted murals of Liang standing between stars and swords. Musicians composed symphonies blending Gregorian chants with Tibetan throat singing. Humanity, for the first time in generations, felt whole. But the Vorth fleet kept coming. Now only 12 days out. And High Marshal Cale Vorth had received Torvak's warning. He crushed the message in his clawed fist. Superstition, he snarled. The humans use some primitive psychic trick. It will not work twice. He ordered the fleet to increase speed and activated the dreadnought's primary weapons. Let them sing all they want, he growled. Ash does not sing. Meanwhile, aboard the horizon's edge, Liang recovered slowly. He spent hours in meditation, rebuilding his strength. Vance brought him tea each morning, watching the old man's hands, still steady, despite everything. Did it work? Vance finally asked one day. Liang sipped his tea. The seed is planted. Whether it grows depends on what happens next. What will happen next? Liang looked out the viewport at the approaching blue-green jewel of Earth. They will come with fire, he said, and we will meet them not with shields but with open hands. Vance shook his head. They'll see that as surrender. Perhaps, Liang said, or perhaps they will see it as something they have never encountered before. Courage without aggression. He paused, then added quietly, there is one more thing. What? The Jingwei manual speaks of a final technique, one never used in recorded history, called Wu Wei Zhan, the battle of non-action. Vance frowned. You don't fight at all. You fight by refusing to play their game, Liang said, by making violence meaningless. Ow! Liang's eyes gleamed with quiet fire. When the Vorth arrive, we will not hide. We will not arm. We will stand in the open, with no weapons, no armor, no fear. And we will invite them to walk among us. Vance stared. That's suicide. Or salvation, Liang countered. Because if even one Vorth warrior steps onto our soil and sees a child offer him bread instead of a bullet, the Empire cracks. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Vance exhaled. I'll need to convince the council. You already have, Liang said. They felt the signal too. Indeed, within hours, the United Earth Council voted unanimously. No military resistance. Full civilian mobilization for peaceful reception. It was madness. It was hope. And as the Vorth fleet crossed the orbit of Mars, Earth prepared not for war, but for witness. In Beijing, monks unfurled banners of white silk. In Nairobi, elders lit ceremonial fires. In Rio, musicians tuned their instruments. In Toronto, mothers taught their children Vorth greetings. The world held its breath. And in a small temple in Hunan province, long thought abandoned, hundreds of Shaolin monks emerged from hidden tunnels, walking in perfect silence toward the capital. They carried no weapons, only presence, only peace, only the unshakable belief that sometimes the greatest strength is shown by standing still while the storm rages around you. The Vorth would come expecting primitives. They would find poets. They would come expecting prey. They would find mirrors. And somewhere in the void, the ancient machinery on the dead moon hummed louder. The pattern was unfolding. And humanity, for the first time, was not just surviving. It was leading. The Vorth Armada emerged from warp at the edge of Earth's magnetosphere like a plague of obsidian locusts. 7 dreadnoughts, each longer than Manhattan, led to formation, their hulls etched with jagged glyphs that pulsed crimson in the starlight. Behind them, 50 warships fanned out in perfect geometric symmetry, engines humming a low, predatory drone that vibrated through the upper atmosphere. Satellites shattered as they passed. Auroras flared unnaturally across the poles, twisted by the fleet's gravitic wake. High Marshal Cale Vorth stood on the command dais of his flagship, Iron Edict, claws resting on the obsidian rail. His crimson eyes scanned the blue-green world below, so small, so fragile. He expected panic, missile launches, desperate fighter squadrons swarming like gnats. Instead, silence. No weapons fire. No distress signals. No military chatter on open channels. Just music, faint at first, then swelling, a global chorus. Thousands of voices, millions, singing in harmony across continents. Not battle hymns, not anthems of defiance. A simple melody, ancient and wordless, carried on winds and radio waves alike. It seeped into the Iron Edict's comms, bypassing firewalls, threading through neural implants like smoke through cracks. Cale snarled. Shut out. Technicians scrambled, but the signal wasn't digital. It was resonant, tuned to the planet's own Schumann frequency, amplified by something deep beneath the crust. It couldn't be jammed, only endured. Sir, said Subcommander Vrex, his voice tight, long-range sensors show gatherings. Everywhere. Cities, fields, mountains. Millions of humans. Unarmed. Just standing. Cale's tail lashed. Trickery. They're hiding weapons in crowds. Negative, sir. Full-spectrum scans confirm. No energy signatures. No projectile launchers. Not even knives. A pause. Then, quieter. They're holding flowers. Cale whirled. Flowers? Yes, sir. And bread. And children. The High Marshal's jaw clenched. This was not war. This was theater. And he hated theater. Deploy ground assault teams, he ordered. Take control of major population centers. If they will not fight, they will kneel. In Geneva, the United Earth Council watched live feeds from orbit. Captain Vance stood beside Elder Master Liang in the central chamber, both dressed in simple robes. No uniforms, no insignia. They're sending drop pods, Vance said, voice taut. Hundreds of them. Targeting capitals, ports, communication hubs. Liang nodded, eyes closed. Let them land. You can't be serious. Once they're on the ground, they will see. Liang interrupted softly. And seeing changes everything. As if on cue, the first Vorth drop pod slammed into Tiananmen Square. It cracked open with a hiss of venting steam, revealing 10 armored warriors, 8 feet tall, carapaced in black kite-and-weave armor, plasma rifles raised. Their leader, Captain Zorak, stepped forward, scanning the plaza. He expected barricades, snipers, traps. Instead, he found an old woman kneeling by a stone lion, placing white chrysanthemums at its base. A group of school children sat cross-legged nearby, sketching in notebooks. A street vendor offered steaming buns to anyone who passed. No one ran. No one screamed. Zorak raised his rifle. "Identify yourselves. Surrender." The old woman looked up. Her face was lined with time, but her eyes were clear. She didn't speak trade standard, but she pointed to the buns, then to him, and smiled. One of Zorak's soldiers shifted uneasily. "Captain, they're offering food." "Don't be a fool," Zorak snapped. "It's poisoned." But the smell, warm, yeasty, human, filled his helmet filters. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten real food in years. Vorth rations were nutrient-paced, efficient, and flavorless. He lowered his rifle slightly. "Scan it." The tech specialist ran a bioscan. "No toxins, sir. Just flour, water, yeast." Zorak hesitated. Then, against every instinct, he reached out and took a bun. It was soft, warm, slightly sweet. He ate it slowly, savoring each bite like a man rediscovering taste. Around him, the humans watched, not with fear but curiosity. A little girl held out a drawing, a crude but unmistakable portrait of a Vorth warrior, colored in bright blues and reds with a sun above his head. Zorak stared at it. Why draw me like this?" The girl didn't understand his words, but she pointed to the sun, then to his chest, and smiled. His comm crackled. "Zorak, report. What's happening down there?" He looked around, at the flowers, the art, the quiet dignity of people who should be cowering in terror. I don't know," he admitted. "They're not resisting." "Then subdue them. Enforce compliance." Zorak turned to his squad. "Bind them." One soldier gestured to the children. "With what, sir?" "Rope?" "They haven't done anything." Another added, "My implant, it's buzzing again. Like in the Spire transmission." Zorak felt it too, a strange calm spreading through his limbs, dulling his aggression. He looked back at the little girl, still holding her drawing. For the first time in his life, he questioned an order. "Hold position," he told his squad. "Do nothing until further notice." Across the globe, the same scene played out. In Cairo, Vorth troops found elders sharing tea with strangers, reciting poetry under the shadow of the pyramids. In Oslo, musicians played violins as drop pods landed in the snow. In Mumbai, street vendors handed out chai to stunned invaders. In Buenos Aires, dancers performed tango in the rain, ignoring the armored figures watching from the sidelines. No violence, no resistance, just humanity. Back on the Iron Edict, Kale watched feed after feed, his rage mounting. "They're mocking us," he roared. "This is psychological warfare." But his officers exchanged uneasy glances. Some removed their helmets, claiming filter malfunctions. Others stood silently, staring at images of human families sharing meals with armed occupiers. Then came the broadcast, not from governments, not from militaries, from ordinary people. A farmer in Kansas spoke directly to camera, "We don't want your war. But if you're hungry, our table has room." A fisherman in Indonesia held up a net full of silver fish. "Take what you need. Leave the rest for tomorrow." A grandmother in Kiev sang a lullaby in Ukrainian, her voice trembling but strong. And then Master Liang appeared. He stood alone on a hill outside Beijing, wind tugging at his robes, the Vorth fleet darkening the sky behind him. To the Vorth people, he began in flawless trade standard. "I do not speak to your weapons. I speak to your hearts." Kale scoffed, sentimental drivel. But Liang continued, his voice calm, carrying across every channel, every implant, every soul within range. "You believe strength is domination, but true strength is restraint. You believe power is conquest, but true power is creation. Look around you. We have no armies raised against you, yet we're not afraid. Why? Because we know who we are, and we invite you to remember who you could be." He paused, letting the words settle. "If you fire your weapons today, you will win a battle. But you will lose something far greater, the chance to be more than conquerors. Then he bowed, and the broadcast ended. On the Iron Edict, silence fell. Kale's second-in-command, Fleet Admiral Ilva, finally spoke. My daughter, she drew a picture of a Vorth ship last week. She called it the Dragon from the Stars. She wasn't afraid. She was curious. Kale rounded on her. Sentiment weakens resolve, or reveals truth, Ilva countered quietly. What if they're right? What if we've been wrong all along? Before Kale could respond, alarms blared. Sir, multiple ships reporting neural instability. Crews refusing orders. Mutiny? Kale snarled. No, sir. Worse. They are crying. In Geneva, Vance watched the chaos unfold on screen. It's working. Liang shook his head. It is not working. It is unfolding. There is a difference. What do you mean? We did not force them to change, Liang said. We simply gave them space to remember their own humanity. Vance frowned. The Vorth aren't human. Are they not? Liang asked gently. Do they not feel hunger, grief, wonder? The capacity for cruelty exists in all species. But so does the capacity for compassion. We merely reminded them of the latter. Just then, a priority hail came through from the Iron Edict itself. Vance accepted it. High Marshal Kale's face filled the screen, but he looked different. Tired. Haunted. Human, he growled, but without venom. Your trick has sown doubt in my ranks. I should glass your world for this. But you won't, Liang said, stepping into view. Kale's eyes narrowed. Why not? Because you've seen your own reflection in our eyes, Liang replied. And you do not like what you see. A long silence. Then, quietly, what do you want? Nothing, Liang said. We ask only that you leave. And remember this day, not as a defeat, but as a beginning. Kale's claws tightened on the console. For a moment, Vance thought he would order fire. But then the High Marshal exhaled, a slow, shuddering breath. Recall all ground teams, he commanded over the fleet-wide channel. Prepare for withdrawal. Gasps echoed through the council chamber. You're leaving? Vance asked, stunned. Kale's gaze locked onto Liang. We came to test your strength. We found something stronger than weapons. Something we cannot destroy without destroying ourselves. He cut the transmission. Minutes later, the Vorth fleet powered down its weapons. Drop pods lifted off from cities worldwide, their occupants silent, many clutching drawings, flowers, or half-eaten buns. As the Armada turned away from Earth, heading back into the void, a single message was transmitted. Not from Kale, but from Captain Zorak. Tell your children, we saw the sun. Celebration erupted across Earth. People flooded the streets, dancing, weeping, embracing strangers. Fireworks lit the night sky. Songs of peace echoed from every continent. But in the quiet temple garden where Liang now sat, there was no celebration, only vigilance. Vance found him there, sipping tea as dawn painted the sky in gold and rose. We did it, Vance said, unable to keep the awe from his voice. We stopped an invasion without firing a shot. Liang set down his cup. We delayed an empire. That is not the same as stopping it. What do you mean? The Vorth will return, Liang said. Not with warships, but with questions. And questions are more dangerous than bombs. Vance sat beside him. Then let them ask. We'll answer. Liang smiled faintly. Good. But our work is not done. He pointed to the eastern horizon, where the first rays of sun touched the mountains. Look. Vance followed his gaze and froze. Above the peaks, shimmering in the morning light, hung a structure unlike anything human or Vorth. It was vast, larger than any city, shaped like a spiral galaxy made of crystal and shadow. It emitted no energy signature, yet bent starlight around it, and it was descending slowly toward Earth. The sleeper, Liang whispered. Vance's blood ran cold. What is it? A guardian, Liang said, or a judge. The Jing Wei manual speaks of it. When a species demonstrates true harmony, when it chooses peace over survival, it awakens the pattern. And the pattern does what? Liang's eyes were distant, filled with both reverence and dread. It decides if you are ready to join the next stage of existence. Before Vance could ask more, the object pulsed, a soft, silver light that washed over the planet like a sigh. Every human on Earth felt it. Not sound, not touch. A question, deep in the bones, in the soul. Are you worthy? In homes, schools, hospitals, battlefields turned gardens, people paused and answered, not with words but with actions. A soldier handed his rifle to a child who planted flowers in its barrel. A CEO donated her fortune to rebuild refugee camps. A scientist shared a cure freely with no patent. A thief returned what he stole, then stayed to help repair the damage. The light intensified. The sleeper descended lower, and deep beneath the Himalayas, in caverns older than language, the last sealed vault of the Shaolin order opened. Inside lay not weapons, but seeds, star charts, and a single empty spacesuit tailored for a being not yet born. For the pattern did not seek warriors. It sought gardeners, teachers, bridge builders, and as the sleeper hovered just above the atmosphere, waiting, Earth held its breath once more. Not in fear, in hope, because humanity had faced fire and chosen water. Now it would face the infinite and choose wonder. But far away, in the ruins of a dead moon, the ancient machinery hummed its final note. Its purpose fulfilled. The test was over. The invitation had been sent. And somewhere in the cosmic dark, other sleepers began to stir. Earth was no longer alone. It was becoming part of something vast, something ancient, something kind. And Master Liang, watching the silver light fill the sky, finally allowed himself to weep. Not for what was lost, but for what was found. The sleeper did not land. It hovered, silent, immense, luminous, just beyond the Kármán line, its crystalline structure refracting sunlight into prisms that painted rainbows across every continent. No Indians rode, no weapons charged. It simply was like a mountain floating in sky, ancient and patient. For 3 days, Earth held its breath. Governments issued no orders. Military stood down. Even the most hardened skeptics fell quiet, staring upward as if gazing into the eye of God. Children pointed and whispered names, Sky Temple, Starheart, the Quiet One. But Master Liang knew better. It is not a place, he told Captain Vance during their dawn walk through the temple gardens, now blooming with flowers planted by returning Vorth soldiers. It is a threshold. Vance frowned, watching a drone feed the object on his wristcom. A threshold to what? To the next question, Liang said. The first was, can you choose peace over survival? You answered yes. Now comes the harder one. What's that? Liang stopped walking, looked Vance in the eyes. Can you share it? Before Vance could respond, a soft chime echoed from the temple bell, a sound not heard in over 2 centuries. The monks froze mid-movement. Even the birds fell silent. Liang's face paled. It's calling. Inside the newly opened Himalayan vault, dug not by machines, but by generations of bare hands, the air hummed with latent energy. Stone walls bore carvings older than pyramids, humans standing beside star beings, planting forests on dead worlds, weaving light into language. At the center of the chamber rested the empty spacesuit Liang had spoken of. It shimmered faintly, woven from fibers that shifted color with thought. Beside it lay a seed pod, translucent, pulsing with inner light, and a star chart etched onto a single sheet of graphene-thin alloy. The gardener's kit, Liang whispered, kneeling before it. Vance crouched beside him. You knew this was coming. My order has waited 800 years, Liang said, since the last sleeper passed through this galaxy. We were told, when humanity chooses harmony over fear, the pattern will awaken. And someone must go. Go where? Liang traced the star chart. It showed a spiral arm far beyond known space, a region marked only as the verdant reach. There, he said, where life is failing, where civilizations have forgotten how to heal. The sleeper doesn't judge. It recruits. Vance's stomach dropped. You're leaving. I must, Liang said. The sleeper does not speak to crowds. It speaks to one, and that one carries the seed, not just of plants, but of ideas. He picked up the spacesuit. It flowed around his fingers like liquid silk. This suit adapts to any environment. The seed contains bioengineered flora capable of terraforming dead worlds and purifying poison mines. The star chart leads to those who need both. But why you? Vance asked, voice tight. Why not a scientist? A diplomat? Because they would bring knowledge, Liang said gently. I will bring stillness. Knowledge can be weaponized. Stillness cannot. He stood, holding the suit. The Vorth saw our strength in nonviolence. But other species, they've never seen it at all. They live in cycles of war so old. They've forgotten peace is possible. I must show them. Vance looked away, jaw clenched. Earth needs you here. Earth has already learned the lesson, Liang replied. Now must teach others. And I'm merely the first messenger. As if on cue, the sleeper pulsed again. This time, a focused beam of silver light lancing down to strike the temple courtyard. Where it touched, the ground didn't burn. It bloomed. Lotus flowers unfurled in seconds, their petals glowing softly. A path. An invitation. News of Liang's departure spread instantly. Not through broadcasts, but through feeling, a quiet knowing that settled in hearts worldwide. People gathered not to mourn, but to witness. In Beijing, millions lined the streets as Liang walked barefoot toward the light beam, wearing the adaptive suit now fully formed around his robes, saffron and silver intertwined. In Lagos, drummers played rhythms of farewell. In Reykjavik, choirs sang in harmony with whale songs. Even the Vorth, still orbiting at the edge of the system, dimmed their ship lights in respect. Captain Vance walked beside Liang, carrying the seed pod in a woven basket lined with cherry blossoms. You'll be alone out there, Vance said quietly. Liang smiled. Alone is an illusion, Captain. Every breath I take will carry Earth's air. Every step its soil. I'm not leaving home. I am extending it. At the edge of the light path, Liang turned to face the crowd, one last bow. Then he stepped into the beam. The sleeper absorbed him instantly. No flash, no sound. Just a ripple in the light, and he was gone. The beam vanished. Silence. Then a single lotus petal drifted down from the sky. Vance caught it. It glowed faintly in his palm. Back in Geneva, the United Earth Council convened, but not for strategy, for succession. We cannot let this moment pass, said Dr. Amara Patel, now appointed ambassador of harmony. Liang opened the door. We must walk through it. General Rostova, once the fiercest hawk, stood and removed her medals. The Terran Defense Corps will be restructured, not as soldiers, but as peacekeepers, engineers, teachers. And so began the great reorientation. Shipyards that once forged warships now built arcs. Vessels filled not with missiles, but with seeds, libraries, medical labs, and art. Military academies became schools of intercultural dialogue. Former soldiers trained as mediators, learning conflict resolution instead of combat tactics. Within months, the first human harmony mission launched. Not toward conquest, but connection. Its destination, the Vorth hegemony. High Marshal Cale Vorth received the human envoy not in his war room, but in his private garden, a small patch of hydroponic moss he'd secretly cultivated for years, hidden beneath layers of steel. The human ambassador, a young woman named Mei Lin, carried no data pads, no demands. Just a sapling wrapped in cloth. For your daughter, she said, offering it. She drew the dragon from the stars. Now, let her grow a tree beneath it. Cale stared at the sapling, its leaves already unfurling in the artificial light. He hadn't held anything living in decades. She liked the drawing, he said gruffly. Mei Lin nodded. Children see truth before we do. Over the next weeks, something unprecedented happened. Vorth citizens, first in secret, then openly, began planting gardens. Not for food, for beauty. Schools introduced art classes. Elders told stories of a time before endless war. Cale himself visited Earth 6 months later, not as a conqueror, but as a student. He stood in the Shaolin courtyard, watching monks sweep fallen leaves with brooms made of bamboo. "Why do you do this?" he asked elder brother Chun, Liang's former disciple. "It will only fall again tomorrow." Chun didn't stop sweeping. "The point is not to finish. The point is to be present while doing it." Kale sat on a stone bench and stayed for hours, saying nothing. When he left, he took a single lotus seed with him. But not all welcomed change. Deep in the Concord's underbelly, the cloaked figure watched these developments with growing unease. It communicated again with its distant master, the same entity that had stirred the machinery on the dead moon. The pattern spreads too fast. The humans are reckless. They offer light to those who only understand shadow. The reply came not in words, but in vibration, a frequency that cracked asteroids. Then test them again. And so a new threat emerged. Not from empire, not from war, from silence. Reports trickled in from the outer colonies. Entire settlements going dark. No distress calls. No reiki. Just emptiness. Scans showed structures intact, meals half-eaten, toys on floors, but no people. The Concord dismissed it as technical failure. Humans knew better. Captain Vance, now director of interstellar outreach, studied the data with dread. The missing colonies all shared one trait. They had recently begun harmony missions, sharing Earth's arts, medicines, philosophies. "They're being erased," he whispered. Dr. Patel agreed. "Not destroyed. Unmade. As if they never existed." Then came a message, encoded in cosmic background radiation, repeating every 17.3 seconds. "Cease the spreading, or be unwritten." Vance convened the council. Someone, or something, doesn't want a sharing peace. Rostova slammed her fist on the table. "Let them try. We've faced fleets. We'll face ghosts." But Patel shook her head. "This isn't military. It's ontological. They're attacking our right to exist because we changed the rules." Vance thought of Liang, of stillness, of water meeting fire. "We don't fight this with ships," he said slowly. "We fight it with more light." He activated the global network. Every harmony mission, he ordered, double your efforts. Send more seeds, more songs, more stories. If they want to unwrite us, we'll write so brightly, the whole galaxy will remember. And Earth obeyed. Artists beamed symphonies into dead zones. Farmers sent heirloom seeds to barren worlds. Children recorded messages of hope in 50 languages. The disappearances slowed, then stopped, because you cannot erase a story that's being told everywhere at once. Meanwhile, aboard the sleeper, Master Liang awoke. He floated in a chamber without walls, filled with starlight and the scent of rain. Before him stood a being, not humanoid, not alien, but something in between, a shifting form of light and root, voice like wine through ancient trees. "You carry the seed," it said, not in words but in understanding. "I do," Liang replied, though he spoke no language. "But I do not know where to plant it." The being extended a limb that became a map, not of stars but of wounds. Civilizations scarred by war, planets choked by greed, souls hardened by loss. "Here," it said, pointing to a dying world called Xylos 9, the twin of the arena planet where Liang had first fought Grak. "They have forgotten how to heal." Liang bowed. "Then I go." The sleeper deposited him on Xylos 9's surface, a wasteland of ash and rust, cities crumbling under acid skies. The few survivors huddled in underground bunkers, eyes hollow, voices gone. Liang did not speak. He sat beneath a dead tree and began to sweep, not with a broom, with his hands, clearing ash from the roots. Day after day, people watched from windows, at first with suspicion, then curiosity, then shame. On the 7th day, a child crept out and handed him a cup of water. Liang drank, then poured half onto the roots. The next day, the child returned with a rag. Together, they wiped dust from the bark. By the 10th day, 20 people joined. By the 20th, 100. And on the 30th day, under a sky still gray but no longer raining poison, A single green shoot pushed through the ash. The people wept, not from sorrow, from remembrance. They remembered they could create, could care, could hope. Liang stayed for a year, teaching not martial arts but gardening, not combat but composting, not victory but patience. When he left, the tree stood 10 feet tall, its leaves filtering toxins from the air. And the people of Xylos, 9, began writing their own stories again. Back on Earth, Vance stood on the same hill where Liang had faced the Vorth fleet. The lotus petal he'd caught still glowed in his pocket. He looked up at the stars, not with fear, but with purpose. Humanity was no longer just surviving. It was healing. And somewhere in the vast dark, Master Liang walked toward the next wound, carrying not a sword, but a seed, and the quiet certainty that even in the deepest night, one small act of tenderness could reignite the dawn. The galaxy had laughed at humans once. Now it listened, and learned, and slowly, beautifully began to bloom. 10 years passed. Earth was no longer a planet. It was a promise. Cities had grown upward not with steel and glass, but with living wood and solar vines. Rooftops bloomed with food forests. Rivers once choked with plastic now ran clear, flanked by children who learned to read water currents before alphabets. The old warships, what few remained, had been hollowed out and turned into floating libraries, drifting between continents, sharing stories instead of shells. The United Earth Council no longer met in Geneva. It gathered in open-air circles beneath ancient trees, its members chosen not for power, but for wisdom. Captain Elias Vance, now simply Elder Vance, walked these groves daily, his hair silver, his steps slower, but his eyes still sharp with purpose. He carried a small wooden box, the same one Master Liang had brought aboard the Horizon's Edge all those years ago. Inside, the Jing Wei manual rested beside a single lotus seed, dried but intact. Today he would plant it, not in soil, in space, because today humanity took its final step, not as a species seeking survival, but as stewards answering a call. The sleeper had returned, not hovering this time. It had settled gently in the Gobi Desert, its crystalline form half buried in sand like a sleeping leviathan. And from its core came a new signal, not a question, but an invitation. Come home. Not Earth, not soul. Home, the verdant reach, Liang's destination. For a decade, whispers had reached Earth through quantum-entangled comms seeded by the sleeper. Liang had walked 12 dying worlds. On each he planted seeds, of trees, of ideas, of peace. Some took root quickly, others resisted. One world tried to kill him. He sat with his would-be assassins for 3 days until they wept and asked how to forgive themselves. He never fought, never fled, just stayed, and slowly the pattern spread. Now the sleeper offered passage, not just for Liang, but for those ready to join the Gardener's Circle. Vance stood before the global assembly gathered at the desert's edge. Millions watched via holofeed, but no one shouted. No one demanded. They simply waited, hearts open. We were told once that humanity was weak, Vance began, voice carrying on the wind. That we were soft, fragile, unworthy of the stars. He paused, looking at the faces, old and young, human and Vorth, Kthar, and Quill all standing side by side. But we proved something deeper. That tenderness is not weakness. That restraint is not fear. That to heal is the highest form of strength. He held up the wooden box. Master Liang went alone. But the work is too great for one. The galaxy is vast, and its wounds are many. So today, we do not send soldiers. We send gardeners. A hush fell. From the crowd, 12 figures stepped forward, chosen not by vote, but by quiet consensus. A former Vorth warlord who now taught pottery to orphans. A Kthar poet who wrote verses about rain. A Terran botanist who'd revived extinct flowers. A child from Nairobi who spoke to animals. Each carried a seed, a song, a story. They would be the first human Vorth Kadar Harmony Collective. Their ship, a vessel grown from bioengineered coral, powered by starlight and song, waited nearby, its hull pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Vance handed the lotus seed to the youngest among them, a girl named Aisha, barely 10, who had once drawn Liang's face in the dust during the Vorth landing. "Plant it where hope is thinnest," he said. She nodded, clutching it like a prayer. As the group approached the sleeper, the desert sand swirled around them, not in storm, but in spiral, as if the earth itself was bowing. Then light, silver, warm, eternal. The sleeper absorbed them, not vanishing but transforming. Their forms merged with its structure, becoming part of its living lattice. Not lost, integrated. From orbit, satellites captured the moment. The sleeper rose from the dunes, now glowing brighter, its spiral arms unfurling like petals. And, within its core, 12 new lights pulsed, human, Vorth Thar, joining Liang's steady beacon. It turned toward the stars, and vanished. On Earth, silence. Then, music, not from speakers, from people. A flute in Kyoto, a drum in Dakar, a violin in Buenos Aires, a Vorth throat hum in orbit, all playing the same melody, the one sung during the Vorth invasion, the song of non-resistance, of open hands. It rose into the sky, weaving through the atmosphere, riding solar winds into the void. A message, a lullaby for the cosmos. Deep in the Concord archives, the cloaked figure watched the departure feed. For the first time, it did not report to its master. Instead, it removed its hood. Beneath lay a face neither human nor alien, but familiar, ancient. Its eyes held galaxies. It whispered, not in malice, but awe. The pattern is complete. Far away, on a moon long thought dead, the ancient machinery powered down forever. Its task finished. The test had not been about strength or intelligence or technology. It had been about compassion. And humanity had passed, not by conquering but by caring. Years later, stories returned. Fragments, carried on solar winds, decoded by poets more than scientists, of a world where rivers ran backward until strangers shared water, of a city built inside a hollow asteroid, its walls painted with Earth's constellations, of a warlord who laid down his axe to plant an apple tree and wept when it bore fruit. And, always at the center, a monk in saffron robes, walking barefoot through ash, offering tea to enemies, teaching children to listen to the wind. He never called himself a hero. He called himself a student. And Earth his classroom. Back on the hill outside Beijing, Elder Vance sat beneath a new tree, grown from the lotus seed he'd kept. Its flowers glowed faintly at night, casting soft light over the graves of those lost in the old wars. He opened the Jingwei manual one last time. The final passage read, "When you have taught the stars to bloom, do not seek praise. Return to the courtyard, sweep the leaves, and wait for the next student to ask how." Vance closed the scroll, stood, took up his broom, and began to sweep, not because the leaves would stay gone, but because the act itself was the answer. Below him, Earth breathed calm whole alive. Above, the stars watched, and for the first time in cosmic history, they were learning from us. The galaxy had laughed at humans once. Now, it followed their example, and in the endless dark, gardens began to grow.